A trend I'm getting really sick of in esports, and I find just absolutely unreasonable and to have gone completely out of proportion from what would be a normal way to live life and have a society, is where someone makes what's a relatively minor fuck up. They say something silly or crass or just inappropriate at the moment. And even though they clearly do not intend it to be more than a joke or just a stupid moment of frustration, people act with this ridiculously disproportionate level of public outrage. They make demands that this person be like fined, punished, sometimes fired, like run out of the scene completely. This like blows up into like witch hunts, people bringing this stuff up months, years later as though that defined the person's entire life. And, you know, there was a list of sins that they would never be able to take off that, like that black mark next to them. And then even worse, people then, due to the disproportionate public reaction, thinking that their response must be equally disproportionate in like begging for forgiveness and like trying to crawl across broken glass and show like, oh, I know I'm worthless. I've just fucked up so much. Like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like there was a bunch of examples of this throughout esports history, but a couple of recent ones, okay. I mean, one, a very quick one that I'll go into in a minute is obviously the Cold Zero one, where he had an outburst on Twitter and just in a moment of frustration called a kid a faggot. And then more recently, the one that's prompted me to make this video actually is in Overwatch, the Team Envious player Taimu, who's actually got a pretty sick Widowmaker, he's a DPS player. He was in the Twitch chat for the OGN tournament that's going on at the moment. Wait a second, was it actually OGN? Yeah, the OGN Apex tournament that's going on, Season 1. And the player Mort from Reunited, the support player, was being interviewed by the woman who does the interviews. And Taimu made like a comment, first of all, like he put, gonna check those pantsers when I'm getting interviewed, lol. And then later on when the woman asks more, like, you know, what do you want to explore in Soul or whatever, Taimu says in Twitch chat again, I want to explore that interviewer girl thighs, Kipo. Now, OGN warned him for this, and they fined him some of his prize money. So ultimately, right now, this isn't like one where it's a great example of like the outrage and the witch hunt and everything. But his apology came out, okay, he made it a twit longer. And his apology, listen to this. It says, I'm sorry, in English, that's the title. Yesterday, I made a terrible comment that I should not have made in Twitch chat about the OGN interviewer. I acknowledge that my comment disgusted and offended many people, including the interviewer. I understand that my comment cannot be considered as just a joke, and at the time I was careless in my thinking. To everyone who was affected and hurt by my inconsiderate and brash actions, I hang my head in apology. I am also very sorry for disappointing our loyal fans. I beg that you will forgive my immature actions, and I plan to show a more mature version of myself in the future. I will reflect upon this as we go into today's match, and once again, I deeply apologize for my actions. Now, the other example, the Cold Zero example, was when he just told the kid who put some stupid video, like implying Cold Zero was a hacker. Cold Zero just replied to him on Twitter, shut up, faggot kid. Now, here's the thing. People in these two scenarios are actually not even from Western English language speaking, like American culture, which is the primary kind of culture and way that we're generally enforcing this stuff, even though in this case it's OGN enforcing it, so in theory it's from Korea, etc. But that's the general outrage of fans that comes into this scenario. I mean, in this case, Taimu's a Finn and obviously Cold Zero as a Brazilian, and Cold Zero has much worse English than Taimu does. But the thing is, in terms of like outrage, people in general just love to get outraged. It's like, even though I don't think they're like seeking it absolutely, like they're not literally going around looking for everything, what happens is when they see an opportunity to get outraged, they'll see a comment and they'll choose to interpret that comment in the worst possible reading or rendering of that comment as though that person filled it full of like ridiculous entendre and special meanings and like implications, and oh, he's obviously actually alluding to the fact he really wants, and they go as deep as you could possibly go, and they do it themselves to enjoy the outrage of feeling like, what righteous indignation I feel that this guy is scum and must be punished and he's lesser than me, and they're getting off on this feeling of like anger and vitriol. And even when it's made clear by the person in question or those who know the person, oh, by the way, this is like a joke and he either didn't realize it would be interpreted this way, he hasn't thought it through, or it's not intended to be hateful, it's just a stupid like moment of frustration in Cold Zero's case, or just a joke here that's like actually off color. Like, you got to understand, mate, in Western culture or in English language culture, you can't really just say things like that, otherwise people are going to get upset. Even though that's the case, even when that's then communicated to people, people will then persist. They will bring it up again without ignoring all that context, and they will continue to read it in the most ridiculous manner. And they'll even assert the right that because they could read it that way, even when they get information to the opposite, that they're allowed to continue, and that therefore the outrage should reach that level, and it should be treated as if the person did say that ridiculous thing, because it's possible for someone who doesn't know them to interpret it that way. And it doesn't matter what the person then says. There's no context allowed in the scenario. All nuance is removed. And so there's always this demand for like blood. I mean, metaphorically, obviously they demand like punishment, like find the player. They should never be able to say that again. Like obviously we can all just harass him as fans. Like let's bring this up again. Or maybe he should even lose his job, or the team should punish him. This is like a general trend. Now, I'm talking more about the general thing here. That didn't particularly happen to this player in the same degree. I'm talking about something I've seen in many examples of, and this is a good modern example of how the sort of thing, the sort of opportunity people take to get outraged over things in esports. And so as a result, because of that disproportionate reaction from the public, you then get the disproportionate reaction from the players to try and even that out, because they feel like if people are that mad, even if they themselves didn't feel like, oh, yeah, they get sucked into that worldview, oh, maybe that is the case, or their team tells them just apologise as much as possible. So they come out and they make these ridiculous apologies. That guy's apology there is absolutely ridiculous for a stupid comment on Twitch chat that, yeah, he probably shouldn't have said if he wants to be a pro player, but it's not the end of the world in any way. Like think of the wording on this. I made a terrible comment. Is that a terrible comment, is it? A terrible comment would be like, lol, gonna rape her later, or like, fuck, why do they even let women on these things? They're all idiots, you know. Or like, you know what? I hate people of a certain country and think they should all be killed. Or you know what? Why do they allow young babies that are all girls to be born? Why don't they just kill them all? Like these would be terrible comments. Let's not mistake what a terrible comment is and bring it down to the level of like a stupid off-color joke that shouldn't be made, sure, but isn't the end of the world to make, and you can definitely come back from with an apology. And then the part that he's putting like, my comment disgusted and offended many people. Really? Many people? Is it not just like a few vocal minority that were really disgusted and offended? Because as you then explain, you should always have a chance to explain yourself, what you really think, etc. Surely they're not truly disgusted. They're just like, oh, come on, man, like that's a bit crass, isn't it? Like, you know, be a bit more professional, like, you know, that it's kind of rude to say it, and, you know, think about the girl's feelings. What if you are going to meet her later for an interview? These would be all reasonable reactions. If anyone was actually like, I am disgusted and offended by this, they're out of line. They're the ones who are also out of line with it. You're out of line on a low level. They're completely ridiculous at that point in time. And no, you shouldn't treat people like that as though that's like a reasonable response from them. And then when he put all the stuff about how his comment can't be considered a joke, well, obviously it can be considered a joke. Now, it's not a particularly funny joke. That's a problem for a joke. And also, it is a joke. It's just that it's not a reasonable joke when you then will meet the person that you're about to go and meet. It's like one thing I've always acknowledged, actually, about the stupid scenario where I was removed from that event in Poland because I'd made stupid comments about how, like, there's not much going on there, and then I joked about the fact that, like, they have an existential hole or whatever. One thing I've always acknowledged is, regardless of the fact that I don't think those are the most ridiculous comments ever, and in isolation I don't think they're in any way xenophobic or hateful, one thing I've always acknowledged is that you shouldn't really make them if you're going to go and attempt to work in the country on the next day. That's just, like, reasonable in that sense. And yeah, people are going to be outraged, okay, that can certainly be the case, but if you're going to be away from them in the world or you're going to be elsewhere, yeah, it's not a big deal, is it? They can just be outraged and they took your joke a different way than you intended it. But if you're going to go and then meet them, yeah, they're going to be uncomfortable in that scenario. So if you could really think that through, yeah, that wouldn't be appropriate in that particular sense, right? But the idea that, like, it couldn't be considered a joke, okay. I mean, he even acknowledges here I was careless in my thinking. Exactly. So now you've figured it out, you've learned a lesson from it, you move on. Not a big deal, right? And then he puts all that stuff about how, I'm very sorry for disappointing you. Really? You have to be very sorry about this, do you? There's lots of things in life you could do that you should be very sorry for. Like cheating someone in a business deal, like fucking over a relationship that you're in, maybe doing something horrible, cheating on them, giving them an STD or something. Whatever these scenarios might be. You're very sorry for this, are you? And then he put like how it's going to reflect upon this. No, don't give it any more thought. You thought about it, you figured out it's fucked up, you're not going to do it again, move on with your life, doesn't need any more thought. You don't need to spend you will spend the period of 15 days contemplating your action and accounting for your sins and weighing your conscience against God's word and imagining what you shall do with your life, and if you can do good works with the poor so that you can pay atonement and penance for your sins. No, it's not that big a deal, is it? Let's get real. And then the Cold Zero one was even more stupid. I mean, that one, he should have just come out and said, like, sorry for the stupid comment. I was frustrated. Didn't realise that some people might interpret that as a, like, anti-homosexual comment or whatever. It wasn't intended as that. I won't do it again. That would be like a very simple way to do it there. But obviously, I mean, his was obviously fucking written by SK Gaming. But okay, instead he had to be like, I do not, to the lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender. Like, because all he was insulting transgender people by calling a kid, that like a 14-year-old kid, that on Twitter in his fucking second language that he barely speaks. So this whole thing's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the reason why you can see how fucked up the people getting really outraged and disgusted and deeply offended by this are, is because we aren't talking about some massive crime that's been committed. We're talking about a few words or a sentence. Like, when did words become these incredibly powerful, demonic, magical genie djinn that when they get out of the bottle can never be put back in again and just wreak havoc all over the world and ruin everyone's life? When did they become that? I mean, we're not talking about words as in like someone making some like public speech in front of a crowd of a baying mob that's like hateful and racist and xenophobic and trying to incite them to all that. We're not talking about that. Or someone in a relationship saying some really hurtful thing that they've really thought about and they want to just maliciously, malevolently inflict upon another person and hurt them in the core because they know how to get to their weak spots. We're not talking about anything along those lines. What we're talking about is something that's not even premeditated. Something flippant, something that's stupid, something quite silly on a low level, and something that's a little bit inappropriate. And therefore, yeah, take your slap on the wrist, move on with your life, and that's it. It's not a big deal. Let's not bring it up again. Because if we're talking about like proper behavior, it wouldn't be very reasonable to just keep bringing up some very minor thing, like a few stupid words someone said over and over again for years to come, as though like they have to pay a sin to you personally, apologize to you personally because you remember that shit that they once did in their life. I mean, this is a ridiculous state of affairs, and one of the reasons why you can tell that people who are getting outraged are ridiculous themselves and unreasonable is because, say, someone did make what I would suggest, which is a simple apology like that, where you acknowledge that you realise now that was an inappropriate thing to do, and it was a mistake, and you won't do it again, and you've thought about it, and now you're going to move on with your life. When you make those sorts of apologies, right, people, it's not enough. In fact, sometimes even the ridiculous apologies like this guy made, where you just put on sackcloth and you gnash your teeth and you wail in the darkness, so please, Lord, please, I promise I will, if you give me one last chance, I beg of you. Even people who make those apologies, the people who have the outrage don't accept that. Because you know why? They haven't got enough time to feel the outrage yet. They haven't got to really work themselves up and say what you should happen to you and the worst things. And even worse, because they love that feeling of outrage, they really hate it when you then take away some of that by explaining that actually you weren't racist and that you didn't mean that to be really bad. And you know what? You actually don't really sexually want to like do anything to harass that girl. It's a stupid comment. When you say that, their justification for being so outraged is taken away a little bit. So they're a bit annoyed because they haven't fully got to vent that and fully feel that feeling and be really angry and upset. And so say, hey, I'm busy in the middle. Don't you dare take that away from me. And so they just keep it going. And so these people always want extra punishment and always want things to continue and for that to be brought up years later. They're not satisfied or placated by these apologies. I mean, there's this great quote by Nietzsche I always think of in these scenarios. It is the one where he says, distrust all in whom the impulse to punish is powerful. Because the idea is there's something coming from within them then, projecting outwards. It's not that they're trying to just look at the world, see a reasonable accounting and help you along the right path. No, they want to punish. That's the real thing they're getting off on. So what I hate about this sort of scenario, what I really dislike, is that people are always describing this sort of shit with the most ridiculous words like hateful comments, like offensive, truly offensive, deeply offensive, like terrible, awful. These are all terms that should be saved for like war crimes or like children starving in Africa or like horrific murders that happen near you or someone like betraying his wife and secretly having 4 other wives and ruining all these. These are truly terrible things or deeply offensive things about like racial things about this race should all be cut off and killed and all sorts. These are deeply offensive, truly horrific things to say. This sort of a stupid, inappropriate joke isn't particularly. It's actually just on quite a low level. It's a bit silly and it probably shouldn't be done again. And once a person acknowledges that, that's the end. So I also just want to say to people who are in that situation, stop placating people who make these ridiculous demands for blood and punishment. Because when you placate them, first of all, like I said, some of them don't accept it anyway, and they're going to bring it up no matter what you do. In fact, some of them might hate you more for taking that away from them initially, when you're quick on the trigger to send your apology off. But even worse, there's also the scenario that by placating them, you reinforce that their bullshit disproportionate reaction is actually normal, is acceptable, and that you acknowledge that the things that they're implying are things that they should be allowed to interpret into all the rest of it. And then as a result, they think they were correct in this scenario and will do it to other people and will continue on. And that their demands for punishment are actually legitimate, which they aren't. So there's a general trend I would suggest for this, okay, which is either issue a very quick, simple one, like I said, like actually, now I think about it, like, oh, Jen's right, like, it was inappropriate what I said, like, now I think about it, I wouldn't want that person to feel uncomfortable, like, it's a silly joke that went the wrong way, and I didn't really think through the consequences of it, so I won't do it again, let's move on from this. Either do that very quickly, and then don't worry about what else people say, or wait a day, wait 2 days, let people burn themselves out on the outrage, and then issue a thing where you go like, yeah, I've realised now I fucked up, I thought about it over the last 2 days, do it like that. And don't think about the other aspect of it. Because as long as people keep doing this, that ridiculous reaction will always be there. But eventually, that will have to just be nutters in the background. And other people will realise, let's get on with life. This isn't really the way to live our lives. When we have to have so much outrage over tiny little words and silly jokes.